get started with our next panel, which is addressing the imperative that our country faces of supplying the necessary electrical power for advanced AI and AI deployment, throughout the country. So I'd like to introduce our next panelists. We're very fortunate to be joined by Marsden Hanna, head of energy policy at Google. Also by Patrick Ryan, principal energy strategy at Meta. Then Ariel Horowitz, energy at Anthropic. And fortunate to have our moderator, head of infrastructure policy at Arnold Ventures, Daniel Palken. So please give it up for our excellent panel here today.
All right. So this panel, as Daniel mentioned, is about the imperative of being able to power the data center revolution in America. Now, I think it's safe to say this audience at the Energy Imperative Summit is one that is positively inclined to view the need to meet that imperative. Normally, we could have some stealth protesters in the audience, but the perk of going after Joe Manchin is they would have revealed themselves by now. So knowing that we're talking to a sympathetic audience, but people who want to kind of understand the hyperscalers' perspective on why this is an imperative. What is the positive vision if we can? What are the risks and consequences if we can't? How do you, and maybe we'll start with you, Ariel, see the imperative to provide the power for data centers in America?
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Daniel. I think just to note, so for a little bit of background context, my job at Anthropic is to help lead our energy strategy and our power procurement to enable us to scale frontier AI. I've been at Anthropic for about 2.5 months doing that. This is a pretty brand new function for us. So this question is really concrete for me. This is what I spend most of my days doing. Anthropic's mission, I think, hopefully most folks are familiar with Claude, but Anthropic's mission is really to make sure that that we're able to maximize the benefits from transitioning to a world with powerful AI, and that we are able to maximize those positive outcomes for everyone. We think about that through a lens that we call responsible scaling. Responsible scaling doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go slowly. It means that we're going to look to scale the technology as quickly as we can while doing it safely, that we have a rapid approach to scale with risk management. The reason that we believe in this is that we believe the benefits of scaling this technology can be really enormous for the whole world. So we're looking to benefits, not just the sort of productivity improvements that we've seen from the adoption of Claude already in the market, but also types of benefits like accelerating scientific innovation, healthcare and life sciences, the ability to take care of your body and the people that you love, national security benefits to economic growth. We really think that is sort of the positive case for scaling AI. And we already honestly are seeing some of those benefits, seeing the promise of those benefits start to accrue. Here's the thing. The rate of frontier AI model development is measured in the scale of months. So we just released a new model yesterday. Hopefully you've all gotten a chance to try it. Hopefully you're all really enjoying it. But as we know, the power that it takes to scale AI, developing those power resources, that's something that happens over the scale of years, if not longer. So that's a question of sort of long lead equipment challenges, right? And being able to bring those transmission, generation, and grid capacity resources to bear to enable this scale. We know that whatever the course the AI technology development continues to take, that those grid capacity resources are going to have benefits for all Americans. so that while there's uncertainty, we think that the bet that AI is going to scale and is going to bring benefits in its scaling, that's a bet that we have conviction in, and a bet that we have conviction in doing safely. That's really the core of the reason why we think it's so important to be able to fuel the growth of the technology, to sort of see those benefits come, and to enable America to continue to be a leader both in energy and in AI.
So it's a great answer. I want to go to the second question, which I'm going to put to you first, Patrick. And this is a question which kind of looks out and surveys the different regions of the country. The U.S. has a lot of regional grids, a lot of utilities. Each of them are taking different approaches to try to simultaneously optimize for accommodating growth while simultaneously protecting existing ratepayers. If you look around the country today, you see regions that are obviously having challenges, both real and political. PJM has had its capacity market convulsing for some months now. You have regions like SPP that have put forward a new, innovative, consolidated planning process that we'll see how it works in practice, but that has won praise from all 5 FERC commissioners. And you have regions like ERCOT in Texas, which, while the rest of the country has been stagnant in load for the last 10 years, has been quietly growing load at 2% per year, and is now facing 5 or even 10% growth, far ahead of even the second place in the country, all while adding renewable resources at a rate that would make a blue state envious. When you look out at the different regions, which do you see as having policies that are likely to enable success going forward, and what are those policies? Or if you want to go there, what do you see as policies that may have the opposite effect and may constrain growth or hurt ratepayers?
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think so. First of all, there's lots of acronyms, there's lots of details within the industry. So for the RTOs, these are kind of the regional transmission organizations that are responsible for operating and planning the transmission system in kind of key parts of the country. Daniel mentioned ERCOT, which is focused on Texas. SPP is kind of the Central Plains, and then PJM is the Mid-Atlantic and part of the Midwest. I would say, each of the RTOs have a different approach to planning. They have their own market rules, and then those are kind of complemented by, each individual state's processes and their own kind of regulatory regime. And so what you end up getting is like a pretty very different and approach across the country. In terms of kind of like what's working, I think the progress over kind of large load and large load tariffs is one that I think is a really great kind of policy response to the really rapid adoption from large loads, and quite frankly, bringing a degree of kind of transparency and confidence to state commissions, to communities where these are going through, where we're talking about really large, significant investments, and the concern about the durability of these agreements over time is real. And so I think, these large load tariffs are on a state by state basis. There are, I think, 23 or so today, with about 7 more pending. So it's really taken hold. These cover kind of minimum demand commitments, the duration, exit fees, and are very prescriptive in terms of how you can move forward. So I think that's like one area that I think is working well. I think another one where is working well in parts is around kind of like transmission planning, and particularly thinking about long-term planning. You mentioned ERCOT earlier. I would say, Texas has done something that we haven't seen a lot of other regions do, which is think about transmission in a long-term planning perspective. It is maybe not this cycle, but the prior cycle, CREZ, which was a proactive transmission build out to connect low-cost energy sources to load locations, was a really notable one that spurred a significant amount of development and economic prosperity from it. The other one, I think, is the AEP 765 kind of kV backbone, is another really good foundational one. And so as load started to materialize, it went to the locations where there was capacity in the grid. And so as you think about building proactively for these like shared resources that really improve the reliability and the value of the grid, and then when customers like ourselves come along, we're paying our fair share for that portion. I would say, one of the areas that I think there's like maybe was a watch area is around some of them kind of mandatory curtailment proposals that are out there. I would say that, there are elements within the system today where it is constrained, right? And so, however, I don't necessarily know that curtailing the demand is the right single tool to focus. It should really be about creating and accelerating supply. And so as we think about kind of supply solutions and some of the progress that I think FERC and the commissions have made around looking at interconnection processes between gen and load together to start accelerating capacity solutions should be part of it. Grid flexibility is a tool, to be clear. It is appropriate to efficiently manage it, but I think it's around accelerating more.
Those are all great points. I think especially the points about being able to bring on more supply, those transmission policies and development histories you mentioned around AEP's 765 kilovolt backbone, the ERCOT-CREZ process, all have the effect of creating headroom on the grid. And even if that headroom isn't used in the day it's created, which often it was, I think a lot of people don't know that the ERCOT-CREZ lines have a history where they gave rise to a lot of drilling in the Permian, because that was the industrial project of the 2010s. We had the shale boom, and they were building a bunch of high voltage, high carrying capacity transmission out in the middle of nowhere in Texas. And it turns out that when you're about to embark on the largest industrial project in certainly the Western world so far in the 21st century, until the AI boom, it's helpful to have a bunch of power wired up right in the region. So Mars or Ariel, do you want to add anything on kind of policies that you see at the state or regional level that have been helpful or hurtful?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Agree entirely with everything Patrick said, in particular on the importance of large load tariffs and anticipatory transmission investment. I just say that when you combined robust transmission build out and planning with a competitive marketplace, that is a very powerful combination that enables speed to power and speed to scale. It is no accident that so much data center capacity is developing in ERCOT, so much is happening in Ohio. That is a combination of a robust infrastructure environment and an open marketplace where we can move quickly. We can find a retailer that can do innovative things, get capacity online quickly. That is a really powerful combination we should be lifting up.
And I think the other thing to point out there is the proliferation of sort of approaches to ratepayer protection that we're seeing in different regions. That includes large load tariffs. There are other approaches to this as well. We have a ratepayer protection commitment, as I know my colleagues do as well. The text of our ratepayer protection commitment, we committed to not only bring net new generation to match our data centers, but also to assess any cost residual that would otherwise fall on ratepayers, to work with external experts and with utilities to do that cost assessment and then to return that value back to ratepayers. So that's something that we take really seriously. I think we're seeing a range of different approaches to ratepayer protection in different parts of the country. We think that that's appropriate, that approach has to be consistent with the market structure in each individual region. What's important to us is that our ratepayer protection commitment is the same no matter where our data centers are, and that we are going to hold to that commitment and return, do that assessment, return whatever cost we find back to ratepayers in every region where we have data centers.
So I want to turn now, and I'm going to start with you, Mars, on this one, to the topic that has been a topic, I think, on every panel today and most of the ones yesterday, which is the prospect of federal permitting reform happening this Congress. The House has moved a number of bills that have gotten some measure of bipartisan support, and the Senate is in its own four corners negotiations between the Democrats atop the Energy and Natural Resources and Environment and Public Works committees, discussing reforms to environmental statutes, as well as to the laws that govern our electrical grid and our pipelines and our power production. I want to turn to you and ask, what are the parts of federal permitting reform? Obviously, all of them are geared at helping bring supply on and are all helpful to the overall economy if done well. But what are the parts that, from an electricity perspective and from the perspective of a large consumer who is looking at a decade or more, hopefully, of sustained growth in the United States, that you look to from policymakers in Congress on this topic?
Thank you. I mean, this is such an important question. As we look at the market, to realize the opportunity gains from AI, we don't get that upside if we don't have the energy to power it. And in most cases, that means we want grid connected data centers that are able to help make the grid more reliable. We want to be able to help finance transmission upgrades across the grid. But fundamentally, that means we need to be able to build infrastructure. We need to be able to have a robust transmission network that allows us to build. And that really goes to, we look at the market today, we see, we have 66 different balancing authorities across the United States. It takes 5 to 10 to 15 years to permit new interstate transmission infrastructure. We have litigation hangups that can kill projects on procedural grounds. You can spend years in a permit process, and then only to find you have to start back from the beginning. We have a failed federal authority from 2005 that was intended to help us build robust national transmission networks that would help power American growth. Because of the Byzantine nature of that process and because of the litigation challenges, we've never once ever in 20 years permitted a single national interest transmission line. So when we look to the transmission package, we're excited about everything we've seen coming out of both the House and obviously the Manchin-Barrasso bill from 2024. And much has been said, including this morning from Senators Manchin and Armstrong and Congressman Peters. But the pieces of that really fall around, streamlining infrastructure permitting across the board with NEPA reforms. We're proud to endorse the SPEED Act. We think there's a lot of opportunity there to build on the SPEED Act in the Senate package. The transmission capacity piece is really the most important for us. We've got to get to a place where we get beyond a single state veto to regional transmission plans and to interstate, interregional transmission build out when those lines are powering truly national interest critical infrastructure growth. And then the final piece is really on permitting certainty and being sure that as an investor, as an off-taker, you can rely on the permitting system to know that when you sign a contract, you're able to rely on that capacity. That's particularly important in markets where in some cases, our ability on the load side to bring on the power to interconnect to the grid is conditioned on the ability to bring on generation on the other side of the grid. And so there are cases where if we can't bring on resources in a timely manner, then we won't be able to bring on data centers to power American growth. So we really need all three of those components in a comprehensive package.
Yeah, I think this really drives home, right? Permitting reform is so often discussed by the producers of energy because those are the concentrated interests that have the immediate upside of we get to bring things on. And so often in the halls of Congress, permitting reform is one supplier of solar or natural gas or what have you coming in and saying, we want to build more of our resources. But ultimately, I believe, permitting reform is for the consumer. It's for everyday residential consumers of fuels and electricity, and it's for large businesses who are powering our economy. And it really hits home to me when you hear the consumers up on a stage saying these reforms that Congress could make on the production side, we see a direct line to how it's going to affect us on the consumption side. And if we don't do these things, it's a challenge. So I want to turn it to you two, Ariel and Patrick. Do you have anything to add to that you're watching for in permitting reform? Any advice to policymakers who are in the trenches negotiating it right now?
So I think I want to reiterate kind of Mars's point around kind of like transmission planning in particular, as well as like judicial review. I think these are like two key items that, again, back to provide kind of that longer term confidence for private capital to go to work and really help build out the infrastructure, both on the production as well as the delivery to locations. And so very much, I think, fully aligned there. I think one incremental item is around grid enhancing technologies. Right. And so these are on the transmission side. So there's technologies available today around kind of dynamic line rating, advanced power conductors that can help unlock kind of incremental capacity on the order of probably 20 to 40% of kind of transmission. Now it's going to vary, but that's the order of magnitude of what we're talking about. And that is the fastest and probably the cheapest way to significantly expand capacity within it. Now, I would say transmission operators are inherently conservative because of kind of the role that they play. And so I would say, if the Congress can act to provide incentives to help drive greater adoption of capacity today, that is like one other incremental item I would add on in that space. And then I think the other element that's important is that, like, what comes from this is really kind of bipartisan support that is durable from a permitting reform, and not letting kind of perfect be the enemy of good, right? These are complicated, detailed negotiations, and really progress is needed in this area. And I think, we've heard of a couple of items, and I'm sure Ariel has got a couple others to add on to that as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, I think we've been sprinting so fast to set up our portfolio that honestly I haven't been following the day-to-day on the negotiation as much as maybe some folks in the room have. I will say, from the standpoint of working to procure power, we also really see the benefit that transmission can bring, and that having that infrastructure in place would have to sort of our procurement program. A couple of other pieces that we have our eye on, again, agreed with permitting certainty, clarity, efficiency on the process side. We have a report out where we talked about leveraging federal lands to build AI infrastructure, both on the demand and on the load side. Interconnection, not just moving through the queues faster, but also modernizing the way that we do studies. And bringing on, again, sort of the next generation of generation that we need to be able to fuel this build out, those sort of flexible and firm resources that we need to grow this amount of load. I think the biggest thing that I would say to policymakers from a takeaway standpoint is really less around kind of the details of the negotiation and more around brass tacks. America has an incredible diversity of energy resources. It is a huge strength to America that we have such a diversity of energy resources. We also have a really deep market of folks who are able to build on the basis of those energy resources and want to build on the basis of those energy resources. And I think what we're looking for from permitting generally, the permitting environment in the country generally, is that sort of clarity and certainty about having permission to build, so that we can bring this infrastructure and all of the associated benefits to sort of to that leadership case for America.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, America has always enjoyed kind of two chief advantages, in my view, over a lot of our peers and rivals around the world. And one of those is our cheap prices in the energy sector, both fuels and electricity, driven by our abundant resources of all kinds. And the other is our environment of business certainty. America has always had a political environment that has prized and prioritized having a certain path forward for businesses who are lining up capital and making investments. I think in all of your responses, there's a theme, and it's not unique to any one party or any one administration, that certainty has been corroded over time. And I worry that if we lose the certainty behind investment, we will lose the first advantage, which is the cheap energy and the cheap resources that has powered the American economy. So I want to, for our final question, turn to a topic that we've been kind of dancing around in a lot of these responses, which is the topic of rates and the impact of data center build out that it can have, for better or for worse, on rates. These discussions are very often kind of simplified to kind of caricature arguments of, more stuff on the grid, you spread prices over more, it's good, or, more demand, you raise prices, it's bad. In reality, I think we all know it decomposes into a lot of different vectors where prices can go up or down. You have the fixed costs on the grid, but you also have energy costs, you have capacity costs. Ariel, you already spoke to some of this in your response about Anthropic's ratepayer protection promises, but I'm curious to hear from everybody. What are your companies doing to kind of make sure that ratepayers are coming out at least whole and preferably ahead when it comes to the projects you are bringing onto the grid today and tomorrow?
I can start. So our approach has really been centered on large load tariffs. We have helped pioneer something we call our capacity commitment framework. And this means that when we're asking a utility to provision infrastructure to serve us, it's incredibly important that we have a contract with them that ensures that if for any reason the data center load doesn't materialize, that other ratepayers are not left holding the bag. And so structurally, that means long-term contracts, 10 or or more years. It means significant minimum charges. In many cases, that's approximated through a demand charge on your contracted capacity, which helps pay for the fixed costs across the system, whether that's transmission or generation. And you pay that regardless of whether you use the power. And then, of course, volumetric energy, you pay like everybody else pays their energy bill. And then beyond that, it's upfront collateral requirements so that folks know that the cash is going to be there. Again, if for any reason the load doesn't materialize. So that's a structure we've now helped establish in 9 states. We're looking forward to continuing to work with our partners to roll that out. But fundamentally, we want to pay our own way, and that means making sure we're structuring these contracts to so that we bear the risk of what we're asking for.
Yeah, and I think unsurprisingly, a lot of the similar items in terms of kind of paying for our fair share of what that used, both in terms of incremental capacity and then the portion of kind of transmission, have signed on as part of the White House Ratepayer Protection Pledge, which is to bring, build, or buy generation. That is what we've done. I rather than repeating a lot of the same points, I think another item I would maybe highlight, and I know Senator Manchin mentioned this, being kind of part of the opposition and backlash that's challenged on data center development, is also how are we thinking about kind of the economic opportunities that these investments can bring, right? And so for Meta, we've kind of 32 data centers globally. 28 of them are in the U.S. across 23 states. So we're very kind of North American, U.S. Focused within that. Since 2011, there's 45,000 skilled trades that we've supported in the construction of those facilities. And then as I think about, and on Monday, I think one of the things that was really exciting to see is our American Workforce Academy that was announced. And so that's a $115 million first year commitment to train both kind of electricians, plumbers, fiber technicians to really help fill the skills gap that we're seeing on the workforce side of the equation. We cover kind of all transport, provides a stipend, and then guarantee a job at the end of it, right? Because we all of us see kind of the level of growth that's coming. And so trying to make some of the benefits of these investments tangible for the communities that we talk about, I think is a really important element that complements the commitments for paying our fair share. We own our own and operate our data centers for the life of them. And so, we're piloting this first year in Louisiana, Ohio, Indiana, and Texas. And I think we're really excited about that. So it's in terms of ensuring that we're being held accountable with the states we're operating in through the protections, but then also kind of creating the economic opportunities. So more of this prosperity is not just felt within the tech companies, but are being kind of dispersed in the communities where the infrastructure is being built and the supply chains that support it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good note to end on. I think your Meta's focus there on, there's so much talk about, how much power can we bring on, how many data centers can we bring on in the next 6 months to beat China in the next leg of this sprint. But it is both a sprint and a marathon. It is something where the US and China are still going to be here in 10, 20, 30 years. And we want to make sure we are setting ourselves up for success next Tuesday, but also next decade, and doing things like training the workforce and building the fundamental infrastructure that is needed to keep this industry vibrant and keep the U.S. ahead and keep costs low is, I think, a perfect note to end on. So thank you, Patrick. Thank you all for joining me on this panel, and thank you all for listening.